A closing segment on overreach by national and supranational bodies, and they're getting their comeuppance in some cases. The legacy title, The National Post in Toronto, reports that the Emergencies Act was invoked by Justin Trudeau's administration unlawfully, unconstitutionally. That's the ruling of the federal court, not but in Canada they have the federal court, which is a superior court. It's not the court of highest instance, but the governing Liberal Party will face a steep hurdle in appealing against this, because the whole point of this judgment, which was also covered by True North here, is that the Emergencies Act should only be invoked in a democracy as a measure of last resort. The usual proportionality tests were not carried out, is what the court has found. Consequently, as embedded in tweets in that True North article, if you go through it and look at the segments of the judgment which have been pulled out in particular, what was also unlawful and unconstitutional, more particularly, were the bank freezes on the truckers, what you could call it the commandeering or the requisitioning. You could even call it the conscription of tow truck owners in the Toronto area, which did happen. So we've been talking about conscription earlier, but for those with tow trucks, it was already carried out a couple of years ago by Canadian government bodies. That was also unlawful as a result. All the unpersoning of the Canadian truckers, which shocked the world during COVID as the first time that those fangs were bared anywhere in the world, has now been overturned, even just on the basis of human rights flavoured legislation and the proportionality test. Meanwhile, a committee of the European Parliament, the Committee on Culture and Education, has successfully got through the European Parliament this resolution. This was actually before Christmas. It's a report on European historical consciousness. And what's important here is Resolution 12, that the committee, and hence also the Parliament now since the adoption, stresses the vital role of education. Skip a bit, and here you see in the fourth of the seven lines of the paragraph, to allow for more emphasis on a supranational historical understanding. And you're not going to have national history, you're going to have multiple perspectives on history, which is your ancestors were evil, and fostering corresponding teaching styles that favour reflection and discussion over knowledge transfer. So never mind whether you're wrong about slavery, just rage against the machine in the class and then you'll get your points. InfoBAE reports, and this is interesting given Mark's comments a moment ago, that under the rotating chairmanship of Paraguay, Mercosur, the Latin American EU or NAFTA, has entered some fairly advanced negotiations now with the European Union to form a trade bloc. Javier Garcia de Viedma is the European Union diplomat in Paraguay who's been following this and reporting that there is a will on behalf of these two blocs that supranational body will talk to supranational body to form a supranational or maybe supranational trading bloc. Yes, it's got that far, and the stumbling block here is only that Mercosur doesn't like the EU's economic sanctions because it wants to be half in bed with Russia and China as well. But it's got to that point. And just on another point, in Strasbourg, the separate body of the European Court of Human Rights, not a product of the EU, but an arm of the Council of Europe, has finally, only 4 years after the ECLJ, an NGO in Strasbourg, started reporting on these abuses, has finally got a mechanism in place for judges to report conflicts of interest and for those whose trials are coming up to be told who is likely to judge their case so that they can say, would you mind recusing yourself because you're in Soros's pocket and here are the receipts. It's taken that long, actually, to get even such a basic measure in that court. The Financial Times, as picked up by Reuters, has now taken to naked threats. Is reporting that the EU, the Commission, is taking to naked threats against Hungary. So it reports that Brussels has got a strategy to target Hungary's economic weaknesses, imperil the forint, its currency. Hungary is one of the few EU members that still has its own currency, and collapse investor confidence in order to hurt jobs and growth. Those bits are in quotes. So the European Union is planning to hurt jobs and growth of one of its member states if Budapest refuses to lift its veto on military supplies to Kiev and monetary support to that end. The Financial Times has seen that confidential agreement. The deadline is the 1st of February, and perhaps we see a little more about what's going on in Brussels now. But just to close things off, Thomas Sheridan in Ireland, and you might think this is a bit advanced conversation to overhear, but Ireland being Ireland, it's probably true. He reports that he heard a passerby say, The more culturally entrenched the rainbow flag and multiculturalism become, the more emphasis is placed upon the human rights of imported religious extremists, refugees, sexual psychotics, and illegal immigrants, but at the same time, the human rights of the native and traditional people are diametrically abused accordingly. And for more on that, the show notes will have a couple of links on the hate speech, the crime of hate speech now being an EU-level crime, as promulgated, or at least recommended by the European Parliament to the Council, which will have to legislate on the matter. So there's a piece there by Brussels Signal as well, which gives chapter and verse on that. A couple of and finallys as well. Here's the well-known meme of the red buttons that are all bad options. Usually it shows nuclear war and something else. This time the 4 buttons in light of Texan secessionism, which is coming up now as an agenda, is that poor Uncle Joe, who's sweating a bucket, is faced with the options of war with Russia, war with Iran, war with China, and war with Texas. And just a final one from me. I beg your pardon, that's not the right one. I'll go back.
Okay, Alex, we'll end there. We did have a couple of other memes that we'll save those. Thank you very much for that. Well, a pretty packed UK column news, so much happening, but it's very clear that we are being attacked by our own governments, and they are implementing a globalist agenda which does not have our best interests at heart. It's up to us to stand up and be counted. And I'm just going to say thank you for a person in the chat box that's just pointed out that as we speak, Richard D. Hall will be starting his court case. And my goodness, he needs some support because, of course, if Richard D. Hall goes down, we can be sure that Marianna Spring and the BBC will be challenging anybody who dares to stand up and criticise the UK government or indeed the BBC over its reporting of matters in UK and worldwide. We'll leave it there. Don't just take it. Stand up and do something. Find a friend, because 2 people are a lot stronger than 1. Alex and Mark, thank you very much for joining me. We'll be back in a few minutes for UK Column Extra, and we'll be talking to Artwell from Oxford on those low traffic neighbourhoods. So if you're a member, join us then. Thank you. Bye-bye.